This is Robert. He's an interesting, yet strange young man. We watch as he sits alone, contemplating to himself. He's obviously troubled by something, yet I'm unsure if we'll ever find out what that is. But what are we really seeing here? He has an interesting haircut? Sure. Wears a golden watch that doesn't tick? Poser. And he wears old black boots with way too many cracks in them. For work, he plays piano by day. For fun, he drinks with his buddies at night. And sometimes to take things up a notch, he'll go on a date once a week. Or twice a week. Or 3 times a week. One day, Robert was walking out of the local grocery store, which he tended to do every so often. Man's gotta eat. Only on this particular day, something stopped him in his tracks. It was an envelope of cash lying on the ground. Unsure of how to react, Robert looked around for a moment, then looked back. It was a fresh stack of bills and had a red stain on it. Now I'd love to tell you that Robert left the cash where it was, or even turned it into the police, but he didn't. He simply dropped his groceries, picked up the envelope, and walked away. In fact, he was so infatuated with his new discovery that he left his groceries behind, which unfortunately for him were stolen soon after. He didn't feel good about what he'd just done, but he didn't feel bad about it either. To Robert, fate had specifically placed the money there for a reason, and it was better off his than anyone else's. So he continued his day. He went to work, looking over both of his shoulders as he did so. Then he went out, unapologetically spending his new cash on expensive bottles, expensive treatment, and expensive friends. He cheersed everyone around him, taking one shot, then another shot, then another shot after that. Finally, he checked his phone and received an enticing invitation from a lady friend. He pounded one more shot and he left. He drank more than he had in quite some time, and stupidly, Robert proceeded to get into his car. He looked for the right key, fumbled a bit, then he got in. He figured he could manage a quick drive. I mean, come on, he was Robert. This was his lucky day. Robert became easily distracted, ended up losing complete control of the vehicle, and our boy Robert hit someone. Let's talk about Haley. She's young, peculiar, wears dark clothing, and spends her time in obscure parts of town, like this subway, for instance. She's unpredictable and definitely lives by her own rules. She wears low-key punk rock boots, has straight dark hair, and always wears long coats. I mean always. But most interestingly, she has eyes that sometimes change color. And although she has a kind face and a unique style, don't be fooled. Haley claims to suffer from kleptomania. For those who don't know, kleptomania is an impulse control disorder that results in an irresistible urge to steal. And that's exactly what Haley does. Haley doesn't have many friends, nor does she really want any. At least that's what she tells herself. One day, Haley managed to steal a watch, a hairbrush, earrings, and a strawberry smoothie. Soon after, as she sipped on her stolen smoothie, Haley was feeling good about her successful robberies. It was just another regular day. That is, until she noticed something very odd. A man running with a bag of fresh cash, and no one was chasing him. Her thievery had company after all. Impulsively, she called the police. That's right. A girl who had just broken various laws herself just called the cops on this man. Was she a changed person? Or was she just protecting herself? Well, a few moments later, she came across 2 bags of groceries sitting on the ground. As it turns out, Haley hadn't changed at all. She completed her day by texting a fellow who she knew would respond right away. 2 words were capable of captivating the young man's attention completely. Come over. That was her message. This is it. This is her life. Let's move on to Anthony. Anthony is a criminal. Being a criminal is what he knows, it's what he thinks about, and it's what he does. Anytime he's tried to live life according to good morals, he's failed miserably. To Anthony, there's only one thing you can do when something is wrong, and that's to do something that's even more wrong. Anthony would spend many of his nights finding ways to defy the law, although he was never very lucky. He would get caught almost as often as he would commit crimes, and this time it cost him a year in prison. After the long 12 months, he was finally released and returned home to his wife. Although he was glad to be back in his element, the world that he knew had changed a bit. Particularly his wife had changed, but he chose to ignore it. One day, as he was preparing himself a slice of pizza, Anthony noticed something peeking out from under the microwave. It was a letter. He opened it only to find overdue balances. His wife, who he loved, was in debt. He didn't want to commit another crime, but he needed to get his wife out of the hole. So Anthony did what Anthony knows how to do best. He robbed a bank. All seemed to be going well, until suddenly an officer stopped him in his tracks, causing a stack of cash to drop on the ground. And that was it for Anthony. What about Brenda? This young woman thrives on her independence, yet she has sad eyes, an addictive personality, and feels trapped in a world that only she understands. She serves coffee by day, works as a hostess by night, and spends the rest of her day watching time go by as she waits for her husband to be released from prison. Eventually, Brenda did find herself a distraction. It was online gambling. She quickly became obsessed. One day, as she was washing a few dishes, Brenda received the call that her husband was coming home. Initially, Brenda was thrilled to see her husband again. Thrilled. And eventually, however, she grew uneasy. Things were different. A few days later, a large bill came in the mail. And as to be expected, Brenda's gambling addiction had quickly eaten into her savings. It had finally happened. Brenda was in debt. She decided to hide the letter so her husband wouldn't see. Brenda then grabbed her coat, her keys, and left. She walked around the city streets all day with no motive or destination. Things were supposed to be perfect again, but instead she was in debt. She didn't know what she was going to do. Lost in her thoughts, Brenda got into her car that night, and before she could even buckle up, Brenda got hit. So, what does all this mean? Let's recap. Had Brenda not been addicted to gambling, she wouldn't have been in debt. Had she not been in debt, Anthony wouldn't have been motivated to rob a bank. Had Anthony not robbed a bank, Haley wouldn't have called the police. Had Haley not called the police, Anthony wouldn't have dropped the cash. Had Anthony not dropped the cash, Robert never would have found it. Had Robert never found it, he would have never had a reason to celebrate and get drunk. Had he never driven drunk, the accident would have never happened. I think what I'm trying to say is, we are all inevitably connected in some way. Every single one of us, all over the world. What one person does affects another. Like dominoes. One of us falls, and the other follows. And this keeps going, and going, and going, until we've all fallen.